This drink is by far my favourite milk drink. It's the cappuccino, a 150ml to 200ml drink consisting of espresso, steamed milk, and a generous layer of foam. The origin of the cappuccino is a little vague, but from what I've gathered, the drink we know today as the cappuccino is actually an adaptation of a drink that originated in Vienna called the Cappuccino, which means hood. It was called this because of the colour of the drink, as when the drink was prepared, cream would be added until the colour resembled that of the robes of a Capuchin monk. The cappuccino would be made with coffee similar to that of a French press or pour over, and added to it would be sugar, cream, and in some recipes, egg yolk. This drink would make its way from Vienna to Italy, where it would very slowly evolve over time. With the invention of the espresso machine, the drink would be completely transformed, dropping the filter-like coffee for espresso and the cream for frothy milk. It would gain popularity in Italy in the 1950s, and then before you know it, it's all over the world. Today we're mainly focusing on the modern version, the coffee that you'd get if you ordered it from a specialty coffee shop, but I'll also be covering a few different variations in the drink, including the traditional Italian way to make it. As always, there will be a link to my beginner coffee guides in the description if you want to learn the skills that you're going to need. So with that out the way, let's begin by covering the specific equipment that you're going to need to make this drink. You're going to first need a cappuccino cup. Modern coffee shops tend to use cups ranging from 180ml to 200ml. This cup here is a 200ml cup. And traditional Italian cafes tend to use 150ml to 180ml. This one is a husky cup, and it's a 180ml cup when filled to the brim. You're going to need cocoa powder in a shaker like this if you're making a modern cappuccino, and if you're making a traditional cappuccino, you're not going to be using any cocoa powder because traditionally they don't have any. And then lastly, you're going to need a very small 12-ounce pitcher like this one. The first step in making this drink, like all other milk drinks, is to make the espresso, so that's what we're going to do next. When it comes to making an espresso for a cappuccino, it depends on what kind of cappuccino you're making. If you're making a modern cappuccino, you're going to be using a double ristretto, so that's the modern shot. The standard recipe is 18 grams in to 36 grams out within 25 to 30 seconds. If you're making a traditional cappuccino, you're going to be using something called the rule of thirds, which simply means that you'll be using 1/3 espresso, 1/3 steamed milk, and 1/3 foam. If you're making it in a 180ml cup like this one, that would mean that you would be using 60ml of espresso, or 60 grams of espresso, 60ml of steamed milk, and 60ml of foam. We're making a modern cappuccino, so I'm going to pour a modern shot. For today's coffee, I'm using E1 Project Espresso by Clifton Coffee Roasters. Really great coffee. There is the puck prepped. So there's our nice double ristretto. Let's move on to the milk. The trick to making the best milk for a modern cappuccino is to find a balance between the thin latte art milk side and the thick, really dense foam of a traditional cappuccino, because that way you get the best of both worlds. You get the pourable side of the thin milk, and you get the texture that cappuccinos are known for. If you're making a traditional cappuccino, you're going to want a lot more foam to make up that third of the drink. Now this is when you start getting into variations. There's two variations. The first variation of the cappuccino is the wet cappuccino, which is a cappuccino which has very little foam. So it's kind of like a large flat white in a way. The other cappuccino is a dry cappuccino. That's a cappuccino that has lots of foam and very little milk. So they're kind of either end of the extremes, the spectrum. We're going to be making milk for a modern cappuccino, so let's fill up our jug and start steaming. And there's our milk. It's thick, you can still pour with it, and that's exactly what we want. We want that thickness, we want that creaminess, but we still want to be able to get some latte art out of it. Okay, so we've got our espresso, that's been pulled, we've got our milk, we've steamed it, and now we're at the stage where we can decide what we want to do with our cocoa powder. So we've got a couple of options. For a modern cappuccino, you usually dust the crema so that when you pour your latte art, it comes up in little specks all over the design and makes it look really nice. What you can also do is leave the cocoa off and dust it at the base of your design at the end once you've poured the drink, to add a bit more texture and to just change things up. For a traditional cappuccino, you wouldn't put on any cocoa, like I said earlier. So I'm going to dust this on now. I'm going to quickly pour something and I will see you in a second. So I've got a little something. The milk's been sitting for a little while, so it's a little bit bubbly. You can dust some cocoa powder at the base just to give it more texture. So when you go to drink, you get a bit more of that cocoa powder. Just like that. And it adds a really nice like gradient, almost like speckled gradient across the design. And there you have it, a modern cappuccino. So I'm just going to quickly take a drink of this. So that was the modern cappuccino. Real quick, I just want to go over how to pour a traditional cappuccino. 180 milliliter cup, 60 milliliters of espresso, and our super thick milk here. So for a traditional cappuccino, you can either just dump the milk in and kind of spoon on the froth, or you can pour something called a monk's head, which is like a big white circle in the middle of the drink. So I'll just quickly pour that and show you what that looks like. So this is what a monk's head looks like. This is actually my second attempt at pouring this because my first jug of milk was just way too thick. I made it way too thick, so I had to redo it. All a monk's head is a white blob with a ring of brown foam around the outside. And it's called a monk's head because it looks like the top of a monk's head. They're quite easy to pour. It's the first pattern that you learn when you're learning how to pour latte art. And with that, I'm going to take a sip of this one too. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video and you want to see similar content in the future, subscribe, turn on notifications, give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you soon.